This is where you can really get an advantage as a cinematographer. We are often so pressed for time already within our day. With ADs wanting to shoot 1 hour after crew call, that means cameras built, lighting is set, rehearsals are finished, and we're shooting a take. That's a lot to do in 1 hour. If you waltz into your shoot day with little to no prep, you might as well be going in blind. Not only that, but your work and project are going to suffer. So many decisions need to be made beforehand in pre-production, from breaking down the material, scouting, building a gear list, building out a camera and lighting package, to so much more. We've broken down the crucial steps you should take when preparing for your next project so you can stay ahead of the curve. When you receive material as a DP, maybe that's a brief, treatment, screenplay, script, whatever this might be, this is your Bible. You should reference everything in this. Every creative decision you make should stem from this. It's your job to study the script, know the material, know the characters, the mood, the tone. I strongly suggest, after receiving this, to have a call or meet up with the director. Go into every detail you can. You want to just try and get in their head as much as possible. If you're shooting a music video, the material you'd be getting is a treatment. A treatment is a PDF, usually compiled of a variety of stills, and I always find it's helpful to find where those stills came from and watch the full-length version, because they're in a treatment for a reason. If there's a frame grab from a movie or a frame grab from another music video, it's helpful to watch the entire thing that the still was pulled from, just to give you context of what the references is referencing. So it is your job to know the material and make creative suggestions on how to best visually execute them. And if you're shooting a narrative, the material you're going to be getting is a screenplay or a script. This in a lot of ways is more complex than a music video treatment, because I find a music video treatment is usually a mood board with some loose creative attached, but a script is an entire story with many areas up to your creative input. Reading a script for the first time is the best, because as a DP, you already have an idea of how you think things are going to look, so you kind of get to see the movie before anyone else, and I find that whole process is exciting. I strongly recommend, no matter if it's a treatment, a screenplay, read it 2 or 3 times over. First time, get an idea of what it is. Second or third time, that's where you'll really get a chance to kind of really think on different ideas and references, and you don't want to make sure you miss anything. I strongly recommend taking notes and annotating as you go along. There's only so much you can do as a DP from seeing location photos. So the next step in pre-production, I strongly recommend you get yourself on a scout with the director and other department heads. There are also 2 types of scouts. First, a location scout. This often involves visiting multiple locations with the intention of narrowing it down and choosing one. For example, you would sort of design a whole day if you were looking for a gym to visit like 5 or 6 gyms in one day. This would be the location scout. This typically is just a director and a producer. And then once they've narrowed and locked down this location, that's when the rest of the crew would be invited. The next kind of scout is a tech scout. And this is once the location has been locked, all the department heads, director, DP, gaffer, key grip, art department, first AD, producer, they're all invited to see the location that we're going to be shooting at. Tech scouts are great because up until this point, you've only really read the material, seen references. This is your first time to get to, apply everything that you've been thinking about to the actual set. Usually the director had a hand in selecting the location. So my first conversations on tech scouts are with the director, and I love to sort of map out what they had in mind. They will sort of show you maybe where certain scenes would look good, and obviously as a DP, you can offer your input as well. Most department heads on your project should be at the tech scout as well. Take this time to talk to the production designer. I find that this relationship is really important between a DP and a production designer because they are essentially building the set that you're going to be photographing. So the questions I usually always like to ask are about windows and lamps, because those are two sort of sources of light that I often like to use as a DP. So when it comes to windows, I'll usually ask if they plan to put sheer curtains, and on lamps, I'll ask if they plan on putting lamps in the frame. Your gaffer and key grip in most instances will be at the Tech Scout. I find this is very helpful because they have a laundry list of things that they're looking for, and if they're on the Scout looking for those things, it frees me up to sort of focus on the creative and walk through things with the director. But what I will run through with the gaffer and key grip are at least the setups, where the camera's gonna be, what sort of lighting I had in mind, and then they can basically pivot and make sure that we have the right gear to light that scene. I've also been on Scouts where the gaffer and key grip are not there. So in those instances as a DP, you have to work twice as hard on the Scout. When that is the case, here are the things I look for. One of the first things I'll always reference is a sun chart. There are a few on the App Store. One of the ones I use the most is called Sunseeker. This will allow you to see when and where the sun will rise and set. For me, this is a game changer because I can make sure to be shooting in certain spaces when the light is right. You know, I've been on shoots where, you know, the sun between 3 and 4 was just gonna come through a window. I wouldn't have known that had I not had the app to sort of show me where the sun was. So you can actually work with your AD and plan your day around knowing where the sun's gonna be.
Yeah, I think just anecdotally going off the Tatiana video that we did, it was a lower budget music video, but the space we were using was an apartment on the second level with some really cool light windows that would let in a lot of natural light, and we actually used that for the majority of the video as kind of our main source of light, was knowing where the sun was going to pass, and that we would shoot that scene at a particular time because we knew the sun would be coming through those windows and act as our key. So it's important, to going to location scouts or tech scouts, see the location, kind of know where the sun and light is going to be, or the best places for you to place lights, what kind of lights you'll need to rent. And so just using pre-production to map out your lighting techniques, your lighting setups, and just knowing what gear you're gonna rent and use, I think is all super important stuff.
The second thing I always like to look for is power. Where is the power coming from? Is it coming from a household outlet or from a generator? Knowing this has a trickle-down effect on the kind of gear you'll be renting. The third thing I always check are the general location limitations. For instance, does the location allow for a hazer? Are we shooting on the second floor? Where is a good place to stage gear? These are the kind of questions I like to have answers to, because when you're, shooting on the day and you've only got an hour in the morning to get everything all figured out, you want to be focusing on everything else. You don't want to be worrying about all these little details on where to park the grip truck, where to stage gear. You want to have all these things checked off. Making a top-down diagram as a DP is incredibly helpful. Some people like to reserve this for larger, more complicated sets where there's going to be green screen and special effects and tons of units, and yeah, I would make a top-down in that instance. But I like to make a top-down after a scout because it allows me to sort of visually articulate some different things I'm experimenting with. By having a top-down, you essentially have an app or a piece of paper where you're illustrating where certain lights are gonna be, where certain diffusion's gonna be, where the camera's gonna be. It just allows me to workshop different ideas I have going on. And if you end up liking the way the top-down is illustrating what you have going on, when it comes time to your shoot day, you can hand this piece of paper or screenshot of your top-down to your gaffer and key grip. And what's cool about this is it actually frees you up as a DP. You don't have to now be babysitting the lighting. You've given them a blueprint. They know how to light the set now. Now you can go walk the set with your director. You can walk through your setups and where the camera's gonna be. You have so many responsibilities as a DP. So if you can in prep make something that frees you up on the lighting side to focus on other things, that's incredibly helpful. choosing an aspect ratio is one of the last things I do in pre-production. I'll have a conversation with the director. I'll kind of see where everything in pre-production and prep has led to, the conversations, the references. Usually a lot of these things in prep will inform the aspect ratio, but in a lot of instances, this might be something you and your director need to decide on. And the aspect ratio is really your window into the project. Are we seeing it through 4:3? Are we seeing it in widescreen? These are different. Each of these aspect ratios will affect the viewer in a different way and convey a different sort of feeling. Knowing when to choose one aspect ratio over another is really important. For instance, Stanley Kubrick, he often shot in 1:6:6 or 4:3 because he loved the tallness of that aspect ratio and was able to see the ceilings of his sets. Or John Ford, he shot a lot of Westerns and he loved 2:4 widescreen because he was able to see, the vistas and Monument Valley. So these are two examples of how aspect ratio was sort of promoting the story or what the director wanted to be seen. So, I challenge you and your director to not just pick an aspect ratio because it looks cool. 2:4, yeah, it sure looks cinematic, but make sure that it's helping tell your story as well.